Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Terra Nova and watched the stars through the main window. The year was 2087, and humanity had finally done something that many thought impossible. Every nation on Earth now worked together under one government called the Global Federation. No more wars between countries and no more fighting over borders. Jake remembered the old days when his grandfather told stories about nations that hated each other. Those days were gone forever. The Terra Nova was humanity's first deep space ship that could travel faster than light. Jake and his crew were exploring the Kepler 442 system, looking for new planets and resources. They had been out here for 3 months and found nothing but empty space and dead rocks. Jake was starting to think this mission would be another boring trip when his sensors officer called out. "Captain, I'm getting something strange on long-range sensors," said Lieutenant Ben Parker. "There's a large object hiding in the asteroid field near the 4th planet." Jake walked over to look at the sensor readings. The object was too big to be a normal asteroid, and it was giving off unusual energy signatures. "Take us closer, but keep our distance. I want to know what that thing is before we get too close." As Terra Nova moved toward the asteroid field, the object became clearer on their screens. It was definitely not natural. The thing looked like a ship, but unlike anything humans had ever built. It was long and sleek, with strange curves and materials that seemed to change color in the starlight. Most importantly, it looked damaged and dead in space. Dr. Lisa Parker, the mission's expert on ancient things, studied the readings from her station. "Captain, this is definitely artificial, but the design is completely unknown. The materials are unlike anything in our databases. I think we're looking at our first contact with alien technology." Jake felt his heart speed up. First contact with aliens was something every space explorer dreamed about. But this ship looked broken and abandoned. "Any signs of life aboard that vessel?" "No, sir," replied Ben Parker. "The ship appears to be completely dead. No power signatures, no communications, nothing. But the hull is still intact, so we might be able to board her safely." Jake made his decision. "Prepare an away team. I want you, Dr. Parker, and Engineer Carl Johnson to come with me. We're going to take a look at humanity's first alien spacecraft." The boarding party put on their spacesuits and took a small shuttle over to the alien ship. Up close, the vessel was even more impressive. It was at least twice the size of Terra Nova, and covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly. They found an airlock that looked different from human designs but served the same purpose. Carl Johnson worked on the alien controls and managed to get the airlock open. The atmosphere inside is gone, but the ship's structure seems solid. "We should be safe to explore as long as we keep our suits on." Inside the alien ship, Jake and his team found wonders beyond imagination. The corridors were wide and tall, suggesting the aliens were much larger than humans. Strange lights still worked in some places, casting an eerie glow on walls covered with symbols and artwork. Everything looked elegant but also somehow threatening. Dr. Lisa Parker found what looked like the ship's computer center. Banks of alien technology lined the walls, most of it dark and silent. But one section still had power and was displaying information in the alien writing. "Captain, I think I can access their data systems. Give me some time to work on this." While Lisa worked on the computers, Jake explored more of the ship. In what seemed like the captain's quarters, he found star maps showing Earth and many other worlds. Red marks covered dozens of planets, suggesting these aliens had been very busy exploring or conquering other worlds. After 2 hours of work, Lisa called out excitedly, "Captain, you need to see this. I've managed to translate some of their records, and what I've found changes everything." Jake and the others gathered around Lisa's portable computer where she had been working to understand the alien data. The information she showed them made Jake's blood run cold. "These aliens call themselves the Zephyrian Dominion," Lisa explained. "They've been watching Earth for over 300 years. But here's the scary part. They were waiting for us to destroy ourselves through wars and conflicts. They wanted humanity to weaken itself through fighting so they could easily conquer what was left." Jake stared at the translated records showing detailed observations of human history. The aliens had watched every major war, every conflict, every time humans fought each other. They had been waiting patiently for humanity to tear itself apart. "But Captain, look at their most recent reports," Lisa continued. "They're worried because humanity has united. Their invasion plans were based on finding a divided world full of different nations fighting each other. Our unity has completely disrupted their timeline." Carl Johnson looked at more of the data. "According to this, the Zephyrians aren't alone. They're part of something called the hegemony, a group of alien species that has been conquering divided worlds for thousands of years. Earth was supposed to be their next easy target. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How long do we have? Lisa checked more of the alien records. Based on their latest communications, they were planning to wait another 50 years for humanity to start fighting again. But since we've stayed united, they've moved up their schedule. The main invasion fleet is already being assembled. The team spent several more hours gathering as much information as they could from the alien ship. They learned that the hegemony had never encountered a species that achieved planetary cooperation without being conquered first. Most worlds they attacked were too busy fighting among themselves to mount effective resistance. When they returned to Terra Nova, Jake immediately sent an emergency message to Earth. The information they had discovered would change everything. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and they were about to face the greatest threat in their history. As Terra Nova headed home at maximum speed, Jake looked out at the stars and wondered if humanity's newfound unity would be enough to survive what was coming. The aliens had been planning this invasion for centuries, but they had never faced a truly united world before. Maybe that would be enough to give humanity a fighting chance. 3 days later, long-range sensors detected massive alien fleets gathering at the edge of the solar system. The invasion had begun, and Earth had only months to prepare for a war unlike anything in human history. But for the first time in centuries, humanity would face this threat as one people united and ready to defend their home together. The Zephyrian advance fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Jupiter and immediately began scanning the inner solar system. Fleet Commander Zexkar expected to find the usual signs of a divided world. Different military forces fighting each other, multiple governments competing for resources, and a population too busy with internal conflicts to mount proper resistance. Instead, his sensors showed something that had never appeared in any hegemony conquest before. Every human military vessel in the solar system was working together. Ships that his intelligence reports said should be enemies were sharing supplies and coordinating their movements. The planetary defense network showed no internal conflicts or competing command structures. General Marcus Cole coordinated Earth's response from Luna Defense Station, while Admiral Rebecca Stone commanded the unified human space fleet from her flagship Liberty. "This is impossible," Zexkar said to his tactical officer. "Our reports clearly show this species has been fighting among themselves for their entire recorded history. Where are their internal conflicts?" His tactical officer reviewed the sensor data again. "Sir, I'm detecting no hostile actions between any human forces. Their communication channels show complete cooperation between groups that were enemies just decades ago. They appear to be functioning as a single military entity." Zexkar had conquered 43 worlds for the hegemony and had never seen anything like this. Every other species had been divided when the hegemony arrived, making conquest simple and efficient. The standard strategy was to support one faction against others, then absorb the weakened survivors into the hegemony. But this required internal divisions to exploit. The first battle began near Earth's moon when human patrol ships engaged the Zephyrian scouts. Admiral Stone watched from Liberty's bridge as ships from every former nation worked together without any confusion or hesitation. The Pacific Alliance vessels covered the European ships while African coalition fighters provided escort for American supply transports. What should have been chaos became perfect coordination. Colonel Ryan Davis led his elite boarding team toward a damaged Zephyrian cruiser that human forces had crippled. His team included Lieutenant Chen Wei from the former Chinese territories, Captain Omar Hassan from the African coalition, and Sergeant Maria Santos from South America. Men and women who grew up learning that their nations were competitors, now fought side by side like they had trained together their whole lives. "Remember, our job is to get their computer cores and any intelligence we can find," Davis told his team as their shuttle approached the alien ship. "These aliens have been planning this invasion for centuries. We need to know what else they have planned." The boarding action was quick and efficient. The Zephyrians had never developed tactics for fighting enemies who worked together so well. Their weapons and strategies were designed to take advantage of chaos and confusion, but the human boarding team moved like parts of a single organism. Inside the Zephyrian ship, Chen Wei worked on accessing their computer systems while Hassan and Santos secured the area. The alien technology was advanced but not impossible to understand. Within an hour, they had downloaded massive amounts of data about the hegemony structure and plans. What they found changed everything. Dr. Amanda Foster, working in Earth's unified research facilities, analyzed the captured data and made discoveries that shocked the entire human leadership. The hegemony wasn't just a military alliance between different alien species. It was a collection of worlds that had been conquered when they were divided and then forced to serve the ancient masters who ruled from the galactic center. The Zephyrians themselves were once free, Foster explained to the emergency council meeting. They were conquered 800 years ago when their world was split between competing factions. The same pattern has been repeated on every world the hegemony has taken. They arrive when civilizations are divided, exploit those divisions, and then absorb the survivors. General Cole studied the tactical information they had gathered, so their entire strategy depends on us being divided. What happens when we're not? Foster smiled grimly. According to their own records, they don't know. This has never happened before in their thousands of years of expansion. Their weapons, their tactics, their entire command structure is designed to exploit division and chaos. When those don't exist, their effectiveness drops dramatically. The proof came in the next major battle above Mars. The Zephyrian main attack force expected to face scattered resistance from competing human factions. Instead, they met the full combined might of a unified Earth. Every human ship knew exactly where every other ship would be. Supply lines worked perfectly because no one was competing for resources. Communication was instant and clear because everyone was working toward the same goal. Admiral Stone coordinated the defense from 3 different command centers simultaneously. When the Zephyrians damaged Luna Defense Station, Mars Command took over without missing a beat. When they targeted Earth's orbital platforms, the moon bases provided covering fire. The human defense network had no single point of failure. Because it was truly unified, Zexkar watched in growing horror as his advance fleet was systematically destroyed by an enemy that should have been easy to defeat. Every tactical advantage the hegemony had developed over millennia of conquest was useless against opponents who refused to fight among themselves. "Sir, we're losing ships at an unprecedented rate," his tactical officer reported. "Their coordination is perfect and they're adapting to our tactics faster than we can change them." "How is this possible?" Zexkar demanded. "Every species fights among themselves. It's a universal constant. Division and competition are natural laws, but the humans kept proving him wrong. When Zephyrian forces tried to break through near Jupiter, ships from every human colony worked together to stop them. When they attempted a flanking maneuver near Saturn, human forces from 6 different regions coordinated a counterattack that decimated the alien squadrons. The turning point came when Colonel Davis and his team successfully captured a Zephyrian command vessel intact. The intelligence they gathered showed the full scope of the hegemony's plans and revealed their greatest weakness. Their entire power structure was based on keeping conquered species divided and competing with each other. Unity was not just unexpected, it was actively harmful to their control systems. Dr. Foster made another crucial discovery in the captured alien technology. Their control mechanisms actually depend on conflict and division to function properly. The technology they use to manage conquered worlds becomes unstable when faced with truly unified populations. It's like their systems are designed to fail if unity breaks out. As the battle for Earth continued, something unprecedented began happening throughout the Zephyrian fleet. Junior officers started questioning orders when they saw their forces being defeated by an obviously superior strategy. Some ships began refusing to attack civilian targets when they realized the humans were protecting everyone equally, not just their own factions. The final straw came when Admiral Stone offered surrender terms to the remaining Zephyrian forces. Instead of demanding unconditional surrender, she offered them the chance to join humanity's alliance as equals. This act of mercy toward enemies who had come to conquer them completely broke the Zephyrian understanding of how conquest was supposed to work. Zexkar faced a choice no hegemony commander had ever confronted. He could continue fighting a battle he was clearly losing, or he could accept an offer of partnership from the species he had come to conquer. For the first time in 800 years of service to the hegemony, he chose something other than conquest. The remaining Zephyrian ships powered down their weapons and accepted human protection. As news of their defeat spread through hegemony communication networks, panic began spreading among the alien leadership. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, they had encountered something they could not understand or defeat. A truly unified world, Emergency transmissions flooded the hegemony networks as commanders throughout their territory tried to understand how their most reliable conquest strategy had failed so completely. The humans had done something that violated every principle of hegemony expansion doctrine. They had remained united in the face of external threat instead of fragmenting into competing factions. Earth had won its first victory against the alien empire, but everyone knew this was just the beginning. The full might of the hegemony had not yet been brought to bear, and the ancient powers that ruled from the galactic center would not accept this defeat quietly. But for the first time in human history, they faced the future as one united species, and that unity had already proven more powerful than centuries of alien military experience. The galaxy erupted into chaos as world after world declared independence from the hegemony. General Paul Anderson found himself coordinating liberation campaigns across 17 star systems simultaneously, using the new principles of interspecies cooperation that humanity had developed. Each campaign was different because each world had its own unique circumstances, but they all shared the same foundation: former enemies working together against their common oppressor. The liberation of the Aquarian system became the template for future operations. The Aquarians were water-dwelling beings whose world had been conquered 50 years earlier, when their two major oceans had been at war with each other. Captain Nick Thompson led a joint liberation force that included humans, reformed Zephyrians, and Xerian volunteers who had learned to work in underwater environments. "The key is not to impose our methods on them," Thompson explained to his diverse crew as they approached Aquaria. "We're here to help them remember how to work together, not to replace one form of outside control with another." The Aquarian resistance had been monitoring hegemony communications and knew the liberation fleet was coming, but they were still divided into the same two factions that had allowed their conquest in the first place. The Northern Ocean Alliance refused to work with the Southern Current Federation, even against their common enemy. Lieutenant Sarah Johnson, who had become an expert in interspecies diplomacy, worked with both Aquarian factions separately at first. She didn't try to force them to cooperate immediately. Instead, she showed each group how the humans, Xerians and reformed Zephyrians had learned to combine their different strengths. "Look how the Xerians handle long-term planning, while humans adapt quickly to changing situations," she explained to the Northern Alliance leaders. "And see how the reformed Zephyrians use their knowledge of hegemony tactics to help everyone fight more effectively." Each group stays true to their nature while contributing to the common goal. The breakthrough came when hegemony reinforcements arrived to crush the Aquarian uprising. Faced with extinction, the two Aquarian factions finally realized they had to choose between working together or losing their world forever. The Northern Alliance provided strategic ocean currents that helped Southern Federation forces reach hegemony underwater bases, while the Southern Current Federation shared their deep water technology with Northern fighters. The Battle of Aquaria's Deep Trench became a symbol for liberation movements throughout the galaxy. The combined Aquarian forces, supported by the multi-species liberation fleet, destroyed the hegemony garrison in a single coordinated assault. But more importantly, the two Aquarian factions discovered that they were stronger together than they had ever been apart. News of successful interspecies cooperation spread through the underground networks faster than the hegemony could suppress it. Ambassador Carol Davis worked with the newly expanded Galactic Liberation Council as representatives from over 100 worlds gathered to coordinate the growing rebellion. The meetings were held on different neutral locations to avoid hegemony detection, but they all shared the same pattern. Species that had been conquered decades or centuries earlier were learning that their differences could be strengths instead of weaknesses when they worked together properly. Dr. Henry Miller headed the cultural exchange programs that helped former enemies understand each other's perspectives. The process was often difficult because many species had been taught to hate each other by their hegemony overseers, but the results were transformational. The hegemony's control system depends on maintaining artificial hatred between species, Miller explained to a group of liberation coordinators. Once that hatred is replaced by understanding and cooperation, their power structure simply stops working. The proof of this theory came when Commander Lisa Brown analyzed captured Overlord technology from the Galactic Center. The ancient beings who truly ruled the hegemony had built their entire empire on a foundation of division and conflict between their subjects. Their control mechanisms were not just political or military, they were built into the technology itself. Every piece of hegemony. Technology is designed to work best when the users are competing with each other rather than cooperating, Brown reported to Earth's leadership. Their weapons are more effective against divided opponents. Their communication systems promote distrust and competition. Even their transportation networks are designed to keep different species isolated from each other. This discovery explained why the liberation movement was spreading so rapidly. As worlds learned to work together, the hegemony's own technology became less effective at controlling them. The ancient systems that had maintained order for thousands of years were failing because they had never been designed to handle truly cooperative populations. The liberation of Xerion itself became the most significant victory yet. Commander Julia Roberts, a human who had been working with the Xerion resistance for months, led the final assault on the hegemony control center. But the real victory came when Xerion forces liberated their own world without needing outside military support. We remembered how to fight for ourselves, Keth Mora explained after the successful liberation. The humans and others didn't conquer the hegemony for us. They showed us how to work together so we could win our own freedom. The same pattern repeated across dozens of worlds as the liberation movement gained momentum. The crystalline entities of Prism learned to coordinate their light-based communication with the sound-based language of their former enemies, the Echo People. The silicon-based builders worked with the energy beings called luminaries to free their shared system from hegemony control. Each successful liberation created new possibilities for cooperation that had never existed before. Species that had been isolated for centuries discovered they had complementary abilities that made them incredibly effective when they worked together. But the successes also attracted attention from the true masters of the hegemony. Deep in the galactic center, the overlords of Centauri had been watching the spread of the liberation movement with growing alarm. These ancient beings had ruled through division and conquest for over 10,000 years, and they had never faced a threat like this. The first sign of their direct involvement came when hegemony forces began using technology that was far more advanced than anything the liberation movement had encountered before. Ships that could phase through solid matter, weapons that could manipulate time and space, and control systems that could override the free will of entire populations. General Anderson watched in horror as 3 liberated worlds suddenly turned their weapons on the liberation fleets that had helped free them. What happened to them? These were our allies yesterday. Dr. Wright analyzed the communications from the affected worlds and discovered the terrifying truth. The overlords have activated some kind of override protocol. The people on those worlds are no longer in control of their own actions. They're being controlled directly by something else. The revelation that the hegemony's true masters could override individual free will sent shockwaves through the liberation movement. Many resistance groups began to waver, wondering if their fight for freedom was actually possible against such overwhelming power. But Captain Martinez, now commanding a fleet of former hegemony vessels that had joined the liberation, made a crucial observation while studying the mind control technology. Look at the pattern of who's being controlled. It's only affecting populations that are still divided internally. The worlds where different species have truly learned to trust each other are resisting the override. This discovery led to the most important breakthrough of the entire war. Commander Thompson, working with scientists from a dozen different species, discovered that genuine interspecies cooperation created a kind of mental resistance to the overlord control systems. Their mind control technology exploits the same divisions and conflicts that their political control depends on, Thompson explained. But when beings truly trust each other and work together, they create something the overlords can't override: genuine unity. As this knowledge spread through the liberation networks, the tide of war began to turn again. Worlds that had been lost to overlord control were freed when their populations learned to overcome their internal divisions. The ancient mind control technology that had seemed all-powerful proved to have the same weakness as all other hegemony systems. It failed when faced with true cooperation. But the overlords were not finished. Deep in the galactic center, massive fleets were being assembled for a final assault on Earth and the other liberated worlds. The ancient masters of the galaxy were preparing to personally crush this unprecedented rebellion before it could spread any further. The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin, and the fate of billions of beings across hundreds of worlds would depend on whether the lesson of human unity could survive against enemies who had been perfecting the art of conquest for 10 millennia. News of humanity's victory over the Zephyrian advance fleet spread through the galaxy faster than anyone expected. The hegemony's own communication networks carried the impossible story to every conquered world. A species had successfully resisted conquest by remaining united, instead of falling into the usual pattern of division and internal conflict, Captain. Tony Martinez now commanded the captured Zephyrian vessel that had been renamed Defiance. His crew was a mix of humans and Zephyrians who had chosen to work together rather than continue the cycle of conquest. Martinez had been selected for this command because of his skill with languages and his ability to work with people from different backgrounds. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Zerion system, reported Lieutenant Sarah Johnson, the ship's new communications officer. It's not from the hegemony garrison there. The signal is coming from somewhere else on the planet. Martinez knew about Zerion from the captured hegemony records. It was a world that had been conquered 200 years ago, and its population had been fully integrated into the hegemony structure. At least that was what the official records claimed. Put the signal through, Martinez ordered. The transmission was weak and heavily encrypted, but Johnson had been working on breaking hegemony codes since the first battle. Slowly, a message came through in broken Standard Galactic, the language the hegemony used for official communications. Human ships, if you exist, we have been waiting. The underground networks on 17 worlds have heard of your victory. We never forgot our freedom. Can you help us remember how to fight for it? Martinez looked at his mixed human and Zephyrian crew. This was exactly what they had hoped to find but hadn't dared to expect. Send a reply. Tell them we're coming and we're bringing friends who used to serve the hegemony but chose a different path. The journey to Zerion took 3 weeks, during which Martinez and his crew prepared for what might be humanity's first attempt at liberating an alien world. Dr. Kevin Wright had developed new translation protocols that could work with dozens of different alien languages, making communication possible between species that had never been able to understand each other directly. When Defiance arrived at Zerion, they found a world that looked peaceful and fully integrated into the hegemony. The orbital stations showed no signs of rebellion, and the surface appeared to be functioning normally under alien rule. But appearances could be deceiving. Johnson made contact with the underground network using the communication frequencies they had provided. Within hours, representatives from the Zerion resistance movement arranged a secret meeting on one of the planet's smaller moons. The leader of the resistance was a Zerion named Keth Mora, who had been born after the conquest, but had been taught the old ways by her grandmother. She was tall and thin like all Zerions, with skin that changed color based on her emotions. Right now it was showing patterns that Martinez's translator said indicated hope, mixed with caution. For 200 years, we have kept the old knowledge alive in secret, Keth Mora explained through the translation system. The hegemony believes they have erased our culture and made us loyal servants. But in hidden places we remember what it was like to be free. Dr. Wright was fascinated by what he was learning. How many worlds have resistance movements like yours? More than the hegemony knows, another Zerion replied. We have maintained contact with underground groups on dozens of worlds. All of us have been waiting for proof that the hegemony can be defeated. Your victory over the Zephyrians is that proof. Martinez realized the scope of what they were dealing with. Are you saying there's a galaxy-wide resistance network that the hegemony doesn't know about? Keth Mora's skin showed patterns of excitement. Not organized resistance. That would have been discovered and crushed long ago, but individual groups on different worlds, all keeping the memory of freedom alive and hoping for the day when someone would show us how to fight back successfully. Back on Earth, President Elena Rodriguez was coordinating the most ambitious project in human history. The Terra Liberation Initiative was converting Earth's entire industrial capacity to support what might become a galaxy-wide freedom movement. Every former nation was contributing their best technology and expertise without holding anything back. The Japanese contributed their advanced robotics for manufacturing weapons and equipment. The Germans provided precision engineering for spacecraft construction. The Americans offered their logistics expertise for managing supply lines across interstellar distances. The Africans shared their resource management, systems for efficiently using raw materials from asteroid mining. Operations, Commander Steve Baker led the development of something even more revolutionary than new weapons or ships. The Universal Translation Protocol was designed to allow instant communication between any species in the known galaxy. This technology became the foundation for coordinating resistance, movements that had never been able to work together before. The hegemony's greatest strength has always been their ability to prevent different species from communicating effectively with each other, Baker explained to the Earth Defense Council. If we can give every resistance group the ability to coordinate with every other group, we change the entire nature of the conflict. Meanwhile, Martinez and his crew were working with the Xerian resistance to establish the first interspecies liberation cell. The process was more difficult than anyone had expected because the different species had completely different ways of thinking about strategy and tactics. Humans preferred direct action and rapid adaptation to changing circumstances. Xerians were patient planners who thought in terms of generations rather than years. The reformed Zephyrians on Martinez's crew understood hegemony weaknesses but had been conditioned to think in terms of conquest rather than liberation. Lieutenant Johnson made the breakthrough that brought them all together. "We're thinking about this wrong," she told the mixed group of humans, Xerians, and reformed Zephyrians. "We each have different strengths, but we're trying to make everyone think the same way. What if we use our differences as advantages instead of trying to eliminate them?" The first joint operation was a test of this new approach. The target was a hegemony supply depot that served several nearby systems. The humans provided quick strike capability and adaptability. The Xerians contributed detailed long-term intelligence and patience for perfect timing. The reformed Zephyrians offered knowledge of hegemony security procedures and access codes. The operation was a complete success. The supply depot was destroyed. But more importantly, word of the successful cooperation between 3 different species spread throughout the local resistance networks. For the first time in centuries, former enemies were working together against their common oppressor. Dr. Wright received the first transmission using the new Universal Translation Protocol from a resistance group in the Delphinian system, over 200 light-years away. "We heard what happened at the supply depot. Our groups want to try the same kind of cooperation. Can you teach us how to work together like you did?" Within months, the protocol was being used by resistance movements throughout the galaxy. Admiral Kate Wilson commanded the first intergalactic liberation fleet that launched from Earth, but it wasn't just human ships anymore. The fleet included vessels secretly constructed by resistance movements on a dozen different worlds, all working together using the communication systems that humanity had developed. Ambassador Peter Clark established the first Galactic Liberation Council, meeting on a neutral moon that the resistance networks had designated as their headquarters. Representatives from 43 different worlds gathered in secret to coordinate the largest freedom movement in galactic history. The meeting was unlike anything in recorded history. Species that had been enemies for millennia sat down together to plan cooperative resistance against their common oppressor. The Universal Translation Protocol made it possible for them to understand each other, but it was the human example of unity that showed them how to trust each other. "The hegemony has controlled us by keeping us apart," Clark addressed the assembly. "They made sure we could never communicate effectively, never coordinate our efforts, and never see each other as allies instead of competitors. But that changes now. As representatives from dozens of worlds began planning coordinated strikes against hegemony installations, the ancient empire faced something they had never encountered in thousands of years of expansion. Their control systems, designed to manage isolated groups of conquered species, began failing when faced with coordinated interspecies cooperation. The revolution had begun, and it was spreading faster than the hegemony could respond. For the first time since their empire started expanding across the galaxy, they were facing organized opposition from their own conquered territories. And it had all started because one small blue world had learned to work together instead of fighting among themselves. The galaxy would never be the same, and the ancient powers that ruled from the galactic center were about to learn that their thousands of years of conquest might be coming to an end. The Overlord fleet emerged from the galactic center like a dark tide washing across the stars. Admiral Rachel Green watched from her command ship as long-range sensors counted the enemy vessels. Over 2 million ships of sizes and designs that defied human understanding. The ancient masters of the galaxy had finally decided to personally crush the rebellion that threatened their 10,000-year empire. But they did not find Earth standing alone as they had expected. The small blue world had become the heart of an alliance that spanned 237 liberated worlds. Every species that had broken free from hegemony control had sent ships to defend the planet that had shown them the path to freedom. All fleets report ready, Green announced to the combined command. Her words were instantly translated into hundreds of different languages and communication methods. Crystalline beings received the message as patterns of light. Aquatic species heard it as complex sound frequencies, and energy-based life forms felt it as fluctuations in the quantum field. The diversity of the Allied fleet would have been impossible to manage using traditional military doctrine, but humanity had taught them something better. Instead of forcing everyone to follow the same tactics, each species contributed their unique strengths, while trusting others to handle areas where they were weak. Captain Dan Foster commanded the boarding party that would attempt the most dangerous mission in the war, penetrating the Overlord command vessel to strike at the heart of their ancient empire. His team represented the ultimate expression of galactic unity. Besides humans, it included a reformed Zephyrian navigator, a Xerian strategist, a Delphinian engineer who could work in any environment, and a luminary being who existed as pure energy, but could interface with any technology. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth or even for our own worlds, Foster told his team as their ship approached the massive Overlord vessel. Every being in this galaxy deserves the chance to choose their own path, instead of being forced into someone else's empire. The Overlord command ship was larger than most space stations, with technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics, but Foster's diverse team could handle challenges that would have been impossible for any single species to overcome. When they encountered barriers that blocked physical matter, the Luminary Scout went ahead as energy. When they faced security systems designed for one type of consciousness, team members with different ways of thinking found alternative solutions. Back in the main battle, the Overlords were discovering that their ancient weapons were far less effective than expected. Their reality-warping technology was designed to exploit fear and division, but the Allied fleet had learned to support each other through trust and cooperation. When Overlord weapons tried to turn Allied ships against each other, the crew's genuine friendship resisted the manipulation. Dr. Sandra Hayes, working from Earth's combined research facilities, made the breakthrough that changed everything. She had been studying Overlord technology samples that the boarding teams had retrieved, and she discovered the fundamental weakness in their seemingly all-powerful systems. Their technology isn't actually more advanced than ours in terms of raw capability, Hayes explained to the Allied command. What makes it so powerful is that it's designed to exploit psychological and social weaknesses in their targets. Fear, hatred, distrust, competition. These emotions actually power their weapons and control systems. This revelation spread through the Allied fleet instantly via the Universal Communication Protocol. Every ship, every crew, every being fighting for freedom suddenly understood why their unity was not just tactically useful but literally weakened. The enemy's most powerful weapons, the tide of battle, began to turn as beings throughout. The Allied fleet consciously chose trust over fear, cooperation over competition, and hope over despair. Overlord weapons that should have been devastating began to malfunction when they could not find the negative emotions they were designed to feed on. President Matthew Scott, now serving as the first elected leader of the Galactic Federation, delivered a broadcast that reached every liberated world simultaneously. His message was simple but revolutionary for a galaxy that had known only conquest for millennia. "We are not here to replace one empire with another," Scott declared. "We offer every being in this galaxy, including our former enemies, the chance to choose their own future through voluntary cooperation instead of forced submission." The broadcast reached even the Overlord fleet, where beings who had served the ancient masters for thousands of years heard an offer they had never imagined possible: the chance to be free instead of rulers or slaves. Captain Foster and his team had fought their way to the heart of the Overlord command vessel, where they discovered the most closely guarded secret of the ancient empire. The Overlords themselves were not the original rulers of the galaxy. They were the descendants of the first species to be conquered by an even older power that had since vanished, leaving behind only the technology and systems of control that the Overlords had inherited and maintained. They're prisoners too, Foster realized as he studied the alien records. They've been trapped in the system of conquest and control for so long that they've forgotten there was ever any other way to live. This discovery led to the most important moment in galactic history. Instead of destroying the Overlord command ship, Foster used the Universal Communication Protocol to make direct contact with the ancient beings who ruled the hegemony. The conversation that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Overlords were offered an alternative to their cycle of conquest and control. Foster and his diverse team showed them what they had never seen before, beings from different species working together by choice rather than compulsion. "You don't have to keep doing this," Foster told the ancient Overlord commander. "The empire you inherited was built on division and fear, but we've learned there's a better way. You can choose to join us as equals instead of ruling as masters or being destroyed as enemies." The Overlord commander, whose name was unpronounceable in any known language but whose thoughts were clearly translated by the communication protocol, considered this offer with an ancient mind that had known only conquest for millennia. "This is impossible," the Overlord replied. "All species fight among themselves. Competition and conflict are natural laws. Unity between different beings cannot exist permanently." "Then look around you," Foster responded. "Look at my team. Look at the fleet outside. Look at the hundreds of worlds that have chosen to work together instead of fighting each other. We're not perfect and we still have disagreements, but we've learned that we're stronger when we resolve those differences through cooperation instead of conquest." The moment that changed galactic history came when the Overlord commander made a choice that broke 10,000 years of tradition. Instead of fighting to the death to maintain the empire, the ancient being chose to power down their weapons and accept the offer of partnership. The decision sent shockwaves through the Overlord fleet as commanders who had never questioned their orders suddenly faced the possibility that their entire way of life might be wrong. Ship after ship began powering down weapons and requesting permission to join the Allied fleet as partners, rather than continue fighting as enemies. Not all of the Overlords accepted the offer immediately. Some ancient beings could not conceive of existence without conquest and control, and they fought to the end rather than change. But enough of them chose cooperation that the hegemony's command structure collapsed from within. Commander James Mitchell found himself overseeing the most complex transformation in galactics history as former hegemony worlds were integrated into the new Galactic Federation as voluntary members, rather than conquered territories. The process was not easy because thousands of years of enforced division had left deep scars. But the principles of unity and cooperation that humanity had demonstrated provided a foundation for healing. The Universal Translation Protocol became the Universal Education Protocol as children from hundreds of different worlds learned. Together in Federation schools, they studied not just science and mathematics, but the history of how their different species had overcome ancient hatreds to build something better together. Dr. Hayes established the Galactic Cooperation Institute, where beings from across the galaxy came to study the principles that had made the liberation possible. The Institute's most important discovery was that unity did not require everyone to be the same. True strength came from diversity combined with mutual respect and common purpose. Years later, as the former hegemony territories completed their transformation into Federation worlds, Captain Foster often reflected on the moment that had changed everything. It had not been superior technology or military might that defeated the galaxy's oldest empire. It had been something much simpler and more powerful. The radical idea that different beings could choose to trust each other and work together for mutual benefit. The galaxy entered an unprecedented golden age of exploration and cooperation as species that had been enemies for millennia discovered what they could accomplish when they combined their different strengths. New technologies,